Get straight to it. Joining us now, co-host of the Prof G Markets podcast, Ed Elson, staff writer for The New Yorker, Susan Glasser, and co-founder and director of economic policy at Veda Partners, Henrietta Treyz. Henrietta, starting with you, the commissioner of labor statistics fired by the president, in Trump's words, for faking the jobs numbers and, quote, manipulating them for political purposes. Let's just fact check that.
This is offensive in the extreme. When we traffic in economic circles, I mean, I speak with chief economists, folks at BLS, Federal Reserve folks, Treasury folks all day, every day, and I have for 15 years now. What is happening here is about the worst case scenario that you could envision. Our data collection, our statisticians, our professors, the economists at all these agencies are the envy of the world in terms of their data collection. And it really recalls to me Trump's first term when he started telegraphing that he felt like democracy was a disadvantage versus President Xi's situation and a communist governing system, wherein he can famously manipulate the data coming out of China. And Trump viewed that as a disadvantage that the United States had to adhere to because we have open, free data collection and reporting that is outside of his purview. And that's what he's undermining today. And it is about the worst thing you can do in economic circles right now.
So, Ed, respond to that and also give us a sense of what you think this would do to markets today.
Well, I just want to first be honest. I thought I was going to come on here and talk about tariffs because that was the news that we were reacting to.
We all did,
I'm being
Ed.
completely honest. 5 minutes ago, I learned about what happened here. So I'm reacting in real time. And I think my initial reaction is this is what cartoon dictators do. If you don't like the data, you say that the data is lying, you blame the numbers. And I'm amazed at how shameless all of this is. And it is true. It rings true of what happens in China, where you have an authoritarian regime where if economists speak out and say that there's anything wrong going on with the economy, suddenly the economist disappears and we don't know what happened to them. And so I don't want to start getting alarmist, but it is exactly what you would imagine a dictator in a Marvel movie would start to do. That is my live, honest reaction. I'm going to keep paying attention to what's happening to the markets. We've seen a lot of taco-type reactions from the markets thus far. The market's saying, okay, we don't really believe you. It's fine. He's not really going to do it. I mean, first he said July 9th was the deadline, then August 1st. Now he's pushing it to August 7th. But with this, I don't know. Maybe this cuts it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, so let's talk about the tariffs for just a second here. What's a bigger issue for the markets? This, perhaps, the tariffs, or the job situation that we see evolving today as well?
Well,
it's honestly very... go ahead.
Either
sorry.
one of you. Ed, take it first, and then we'll get to you.
Okay, great.
From my perspective, the markets are in a state of paralysis. And the paralysis is also a sense of fatigue. So, when we saw Liberation Day Part 1, the market reacted to that and they said, okay, this is serious. And we saw one of the greatest crashes we've ever seen in the history of the stock market. Then we see Liberation Day Part 2, and then we see Liberation Day Part 3. And gradually, the market has been getting tired of having to react to the news to the point where I think that the market is just defaulting to what is easiest, and that is to just kind of buy tech stocks and hold. That is my view of what is happening right now. The question for me is, at what point does the market decide, okay, this one is serious. This one is a real problem. And I think I need a little bit more time to ascertain whether this warrants that in the market's view. So I'm very excited to see what happens by the end of the day.
Okay, Ed, take a breath, take your time. Henrietta, respond.
Yeah, I'd point to a couple things that happened overnight on tariffs that were not what the market is expecting and is forcing them to take this much more seriously. First things first, the trans-shipping tariffs of 40% are going to be layered on top of the IEEPA rates of 20%. That's a lot of numbers and a lot of jargon, but effectively what I'm saying here is that the tariffs on Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia, instead of being mostly 20% and partially 40%, are now mostly 20% and partially 60%. That is a huge increase and not at all what the market was expecting. The Canadian tariffs went into effect overnight. There's no taco there. The problems are very real. And I think probably first and foremost, you have these big, huge sectors, healthcare, which is one of our largest, that is seeing a 39% pending tariff on the Switzerland imports, which are all the drugs we use for cancer treatments, Crohn's disease, huge inflows, billions of dollars to the American consumer that are coming on at 8 percentage points higher than what investors thought just 12 hours ago. So those are some of 3 concrete examples of what the market's responding to on tariffs today. It's not taco. They're very specific, and you can see it in the stocks.
And we are going to be watching that very closely as people wonder what their medications are going to be costing them. And Susan, let's bring you in here on just the broader picture. Donald Trump firing officials is nothing new, but let's just remind our viewers that J.D. Vance, as a senator, voted to confirm this commissioner of labor statistics. So what does all of this say to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think petty dictator is right. And, you know, we used to have a saying, you know, you're in trouble when you start lying to yourself and believing it. Donald Trump is trying to take that to the next level, which is not only to lie to himself and his followers, but to actually embed that principle into the U.S. government. I think you need to see it in the context of a broader kind of war on expertise that has been playing out in this second Trump term. It's, I think, very consistent with going to war with research scientists at our universities on the pretext of enforcing Trump's particular political ideology. I think that it's not only resonant of what you've seen coming out of China, but I lived and worked for 4 years as a correspondent in the former Soviet Union. They literally didn't have a census for decades in the Soviet Union because they didn't want to know the results. You certainly couldn't trust the economic data coming out of the Soviet Union. That's part of the reason why the transition after the collapse of the communist system was so traumatic, because nobody really understood how that economy had worked in the first place. And again, it's so consistent with a broader war on truth that we have seen unfolding in our politics over the last 10 years. The difference this time is that Donald Trump isn't even bothering to hide it, to cover it up. There's literally minutes elapsed between his social media posting attacking this Bureau of Labor Statistics for a report he didn't like, and actually moving to fire the director of it. So again, for all those people who have retained this conviction, no longer very much supported, in fact, that Donald Trump is just a blowhard whose actions don't matter, there is a direct connection, as we could possibly imagine, between the rhetoric right now and very, very disruptive actions. And
so Susan, sorry to interrupt you there, but Susan, sticking to that point, Trump himself, we're going to talk about in a next segment how you say Trump has flip-flopped on Gaza. Well, we're talking about a flip-flop here. Trump had touted the jobs report as a presidential candidate, and from this exact same commissioner. You've been in D.C. for a very long time. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Look, hypocrisy is the middle name of many politicians in Washington, D.C. The difference here is that Donald Trump is digging into the bone marrow of American expertise, the American economy, the government. It's the greatest act of self-harm at large that our enemies could possibly imagine. I mean, you know, they are cheering this action in Beijing. They are cheering this action in Moscow. It is further undermining an American system that has brought this tremendous prosperity to this country and, you know, to many aspects of the world. I mean, that's, again, we can talk more about the tariffs. You pointed out it's important what's happening with Canada on our northern border. Trump's consistent preference for adversaries at the expense of allies. This is another action that helps adversaries and undermines ourselves as well as our allies.
Henrietta, we also saw in that same Truth Social post that Trump attacked Fed Chair Jerome Powell yet again. What do you make of his rhetoric when it comes to the Fed? And could we see a bigger shakeup on the horizon, given what we just saw today?
Yeah, saying, you know, put Powell out to pasture is not something that anybody on Wall Street wants to see either. Jay Powell is tremendously respected on the street, and that is, you know, held by every single hedge fund and venture capital firm on the street. I would say one thing of note that I'd add here that dovetails with the Federal Reserve Chair's job, which is that this exact same official that he is firing is also responsible not just for the labor data, but also for the inflation data. And that's, of course, what Jay Powell is following. So Trump is effectively in advance saying that he's going to undermine the inflation data when we get it incorporating now 18% across the board average tariff rates in the United States, up from 2% before he took office. So inflation is coming. They've been able to stave it off because every importer had pulled through and pulled forward their inventories. Now, this exact same secretary who is responsible for this data is going to be held responsible for the inflation data as well. And he's going to point to potentially that information being off when it starts to tick higher. And every conversation you have with anyone on the street says inflation hasn't hit yet. And that's obviously why Powell has held interest rates where they are today. And so the dovetail between these two, I think, is really important to stress. It's an excellent point.
Ed, I saw you nodding just a moment ago. What do you think?
I'm just glad she said the truth there, which is that the inflation isn't here yet. That is exactly what we're seeing in all of the earnings that we've seen this week. This tariff impact, we've been saying it for a while, but people seem to not want to believe it. The tariff impact takes a long time to funnel through the economy. And that is exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing this in earnings. We're seeing that companies are reporting that it's taking some time. They are kind of waiting to see what the actual tariff situation is even going to be. And they're all signaling we are going to raise prices. We're going to raise prices in about a month, maybe 2 months. The point being, inflation is going to come sometime likely in the fall, certainly before Christmas. And that is exactly what Jerome Powell is looking at. And it is very funny how the president tries to undermine the Fed. He tries to undermine the independence of the Fed. And the Fed's still standing. Jerome Powell has not cut rates. I don't think he's going to cut rates in September either. It is, in a funny way, it's almost served to strengthen the independence of the Federal Reserve. So I'm glad these points have been made. The tariff impact, the inflation impact is coming. It's just not here yet. And that's important for people to understand.